today we are beginning a new chapter. And the chapter is entitled The Slaying of Arista, the Bull Demon. And we'll be doing texts 1 and 2. So text 1 is on the board. So you can chant responsibly. Shri Badaranainir Uvacha Atatarhi Argato Gostam Aristo Vishapasura Mahimmaha Kakutkaya Kampayan Kura Vikshatam Shri Badarani Ruvacha Atatari Agato Gostam Aristo Vishapasura Mahimmaha Kakutkaya Kampayan Kura Vikshatam Shri Badarani Ruvacha Atatari Agatso Gostam Aristo Vishapasura Mahimmaha Kakutkaya Kampayan Kura Vikshatam. Please chant. Shri Badarayani Ruvacha Atatarhi Agato Gostam Aristo Vishapasura Mahimmaha Kakutkaya Kampayan Kura Vikshatam Shri Badarayani Ruvacha Atatari Agato Gostam Aristo Vyasrapasura Mahimmaha Kakutkaya Kampayan Kura Vikshatam. So the word for word, Shri Badarayani Ruvacha, Shri Shukadev Goswami said, aha, next, Tarshi, oh sorry, my computer sometimes changes things trying to make it English when it's a Sanskrit word. Then, Agataha came, Gostam, to the cowherd village. Arista, named Arista. Vishapha Asura, the bull demon. Mahim, the earth. Mana, thank you, great. Kakut, having a hump. Kaya, whose body. Kampayan, making terrible. Pura, by his hooves. Vikshatam, torn. So the translation for text 1 is, Sukadev Goswami said, the demon Arishta then came to the cowherd village. Appearing in the form of a bull with a large hump, he made the earth tremble as he tore it apart with his hooves. And then I'll read text 2. Aramba manaha karataraha padacha vilikam mahim ujyamya pucham vaprani vishanagrena kodarharan kinchit chakta munchan mutrayan stabda lochanaha. And the translation for text 2, Arishtasura bellowed very harshly and pawed the ground. With his tail raised and his eyes glaring, he began to tear up the embankments with the tips of his horns, every now and then passing a little stool and urine. Om Jnanatimrandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuddha Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Sham Shri Rupa Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitam Sham. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhudina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapsa Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavan Ishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpataribhya Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasvaya Bhutale Srimataram Padaswami Iti Namine. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasvaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So there's the introduction to chapter 36, the slaying of Arishta, the bull demon. So it's relatively short, so I'll read that. This chapter describes how Krishna killed Aristasura and how Kamsa reacted when he learned from Narada that Krishna and Balaram were the sons of Vasudev. The demon Arishta wanted to kill Krishna and Balaram, and thus he assumed the form of a huge bull with sharp horns. Everyone in Krishna's cowherd village became terrified when Aristasura approached it. But the Lord pacified them, and when the bull demon charged him, he seized him by the horns and threw him about 6 yards. Though weakened, Arishta still wanted to attack Krishna. Thus, dripping with sweat, he charged the Lord once again. This time, Krishna grabbed his horns, threw him to the ground, and thrashed him like a pile of wet clothing. The demon vomited blood and gave up his life. Then Krishna and Rama, while being honored by the demigods and cowherd boys, returned to the village. A short time later, Narada Muni, the great sage among the demigods, came to see King Kamsa. He informed the king that Krishna and Balaram were not Nanda's sons, but rather Vasudev's. It was out of fear of Kamsa that Vasudev, had put the two boys under Nanda's care. Furthermore, said Narada, Kamsa would meet his death at their hands. Kamsa shook with fear and anger when he heard all this, and in great agitation he began thinking of how to destroy Krishna and Balaram. He called for the demons, Chanura and Mustika, and instructed them to kill the two brothers in a wrestling match. Then he spoke to Akura, who was expert at executing his duties. Taking Akura by the hand, Kamsa persuaded him to go to Braja to bring the two boys to Mathura. Akura agreed to carry out Kamsa's order and then returned home. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'll read the translation once again of the two texts that we are covering today. Text 1. Sukadev Goswami said, the demon Arishta then came to the cowherd village. Appearing in the form of a bull with a large hump, he made the earth tremble as he tore it apart with his hooves. And text 2. Arishtasura bellowed very harshly and pawed the ground. With his tail raised and his eyes glaring, he began to tear up the embankments with the tips of his horns, every now and then passing a little stool and urine. I had just read the introduction to the chapter, and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he gives a one-sentence summary of this particular chapter, and this is his summary. This chapter describes the killing of Aristasura and Kamsa's contemplation of the necessity, of destroying Krishna and Balaram after hearing from Narada that they are actually the sons of Vasudeva. That's from Sarata Darshini. Now, it's very significant. There's the word tarhi is used in text 1, and the meaning is then. Or actually, when Krishna began the Rasa Leela in the evening, it is then that Aristasura came to the cowherd village. And Srila Vishwanath gives support for this being the time of day at which Aristasura appeared or entered the village. It was twilight, and the support he gives, and it's also quoted, and again I forgot to read the few lines of the Bhaktivedanta purport, but it's quoted here too. It's a verse from Vishnu Purana, which goes like this: once, midway through the period of dusk, and dusk, this verse from Vishnu Purana is Pradosha Kala. It means from 8:24 p.m. through to 10:48 p.m. That was when Lord Janardana was eager to perform the rasa dance. Aristasura madly entered the cowherd village, terrifying everyone. So that's the support for the time at which Aristasura came, and it's given in Vishnu Purana. And the Bhaktivedanta purport says exactly that. This is the purport. According to the Sri Vishnu Purana, Aristasura entered Krishna's village at twilight as the Lord prepared to dance with the gopis. And the translation is given: once midway through the period of dusk, when Lord Janardana was eager to perform the rasa dance, Aristasura madly entered the cowherd village, terrifying everyone. So right now in Chicago, our sunset is approximately 8:15. So our twilight is a little bit earlier than the twilight that was taking place in Vraja. So it must mean that the sunset was quite late if twilight is all the way through to 20 to 11 or quarter to 11 at night. Very interesting. So the twilight started at 8:24, which is normally our sunset time here. And if one considers this time period of the appearance of Aristasura, one can consider also the significance of the rasa dance. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he explains, and this is from text 15 of Sri Krishna Samhita. He says, the Lord, who is very dear to the eternally perfect living entities and their followers, performed his Rasa Leela, which is the culmination of ecstatic love. So that's what we're looking at this moment when this demon is arriving. So the description is there. So this is the Rasa dance about to begin. This is how it's described. On the banks of the Yamuna's lake, Govinda then began the pastime, the Rasa dance, in the company of those jewels among women, the faithful gopis who joyfully linked their arms together. That's from the 33rd chapter of this 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So since the arrival of Aristasura is coinciding with Krishna desiring the Rasa dance, I thought we could consider some of the mood and thoughts that were being expressed by Krishna just prior to the Rasa dance. So that gives us some idea of what led to it and the moment at which Aristasura is arriving. So the gopis had gone through a lot of loving separation from Lord Krishna. And then after going through that separation, they made this inquiry from him. This is what the gopis say. Some people reciprocate the affection only of those who are affectionate towards them, while others show affection even to those who are indifferent or inimical. And yet others will not show affection towards anyone. So the gopis want to know from Krishna, please explain to us this observation that we're making. And the gopis make this inquiry from Krishna because they wanted to know if Krishna had love for them. So this is the reason for their inquiry. So they're making this general observation. They want to know if Krishna had love for them, or if he had enmity towards them, or even if he was indifferent towards them. And the reason they want to know this is because they've just gone through a great deal of suffering. And in fact, they see themselves as almost having been killed by Krishna because he let them burn in this fire of separation, which of course we know is also a form of ecstasy, as was explained yesterday. But they've seen themselves as almost having been killed by Krishna. So they're making this inquiry. So this is just before Aristasura is arriving. So the reasoning was as follows. This is on the part of the gopis. This is how the thoughts are of the gopis. Is your love conditional or unconditional? It cannot be conditional, because the persons with conditional love gratify those who help fulfill their desires, and therefore they do not neglect that person or subject them to misery. So this is the argument. But of course, the problem is that Krishna had tried to kill them through subjecting them to the separation. That is, he had neglected the gopis. So, they're analyzing. it can't be conditional, his love, because somebody who's got conditional love, they just want to fulfill their own desires. And because they want to fulfill their own desires, they're going to try very hard not to neglect somebody, because it's necessary to give attention to somebody from whom they need to get something back. So, but they're saying, but this is a problem, because actually Krishna did neglect us. So the argument goes. They look at the question of, is Krishna's love towards them unconditional? He had abandoned them in a very fearful setting in a forested area, and he didn't show any sign of being bereaved by leaving them, even though he saw their suffering. So they understanding there must be some motive. So if there's a motive, you can't say it's unconditional love. Because it seems a little peculiar that he left them and he's leaving them knowing that they're suffering. And then they look at this question, is it actually that Krishna's got enmity towards them, like ill feeling towards them? Because, they're trying to analyze their suffering. And then they decide that, there's two ways that you can look at enmity, like if somebody's got ill feeling towards you. One is that there's a permanent dislike. A person just doesn't like somebody. But they think, no, they're not seeing that in Krishna. Krishna's not showing that he's disliking them. And then another aspect of enmity is there's been some unfavorable action on the part of somebody, and then one experiences some enmity towards the person. So, sometimes one finds this in one's own life. A person or persons may behave very poorly towards one, and then one thinks, the natural response would be to have ill feeling towards the person. But, because one is practicing Krishna consciousness, one doesn't. One actually rather analyzes the situation and looks at, okay, where was one's own faults? Not so much, look, these people are behaving very poorly towards me and therefore I'm not liking them. Rather, okay, where was my fault in this, or how have I contributed to the situation? And that's how the gopis are thinking. They are actually thinking, well, if there was enmity on the part of Krishna, what have we done? What action have we performed that should have produced something like that? So Lord Krishna tells the gopis, he gives the answer to them. So he first looks at one particular aspect of their argument, and that's the one of somebody who has conditional love towards somebody, or is very conditional in their dealings with somebody. So he tells the gopis that if a relationship is very pure and loving, there's a pure loving friendship, then there's no sense of selfish interest. You don't perceive any selfish interest. And Krishna, these are Krishna's words. He says, so-called friends who show affection for each other only to benefit themselves are actually selfish. They have no true friendship, nor are they following the principles of religion. Indeed, if they did not expect benefit for themselves, they would not reciprocate. So this is the nature you see in many materially oriented kind of relationships. Persons are functioning in relating to each other based on what they're extracting from each other. So if you give me this, I will give you that. It's very contractual. So Krishna actually says that somebody who's following that kind of relationship isn't following the principles of religion. If they're expecting benefit for themselves, and if that relationship is being called friendship. And there's some persons who actually see friendship in that kind of light. It's, what you will get from the relationship. I know one person, you could say a friend, but that's how the person functions, because the person has a very strong Vaishya tendency. So any interaction will be like offering something, wanting something back. Every interaction, and I'm very aware of it. But because I understand, then I think, okay, that's how that person functions. So I try to just be very practical with the person and just say, well, I can give you this or I can't give you that. Now, Lord Krishna is explaining that actually persons who function in that kind of way, they're actually worshipping themselves and no one else, because they can't extend love towards anyone. It's all to do with how much they're going to get out of a relationship. So he says they are selfish persons with conditional love and are full of lusty desires. So such persons have no love. And the word that's used is suridam prema. And they have no dharma, meaning that they've got no faultless religiosity. So this conditional kind of love is really slammed by Lord Krishna. Now, if we go back to Ristasura, the word that's used next is atta. So that's in this text we have on the board. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he points out that this word is used to present a different mood. And that different mood is in contrast to the mood that Krishna and the gopis have of coming to enjoy the rasa dance. So I've just tried to touch on like the thoughts that were coming before the rasa dance. So we'll see a little bit more so that we can get some idea of the different mood that's happening with the arrival of Aristasura. And this is the mood of Aristasura. He's stomping his hooves in such a way that the whole earth is trembling and shaking. And this difference of mood can be looked at further when we consider the kind of intelligence of what is dharmic and what is adharmic. And a person who, or someone, an entity, which considers adharma to be dharma and sees all things contrary to the truth, this is intelligence in the mode of ignorance. That's described in Bhagavad Gita in 1832. And here, Aristasura begins to tear up the embankments of the Yamuna River, because we know that the rasa dance is taking place on the banks of the Yamuna River. So there's the highly religious activity that's to be performed by Krishna and the gopis on the most exalted plane of existence. And what is Aristasura doing? On that very peaceful bank of the Yamuna where the rasa dance is about to happen, he's arriving and he's tearing up the embankment of the Yamuna with his horns. So he's utilizing the something that's a means of defense, the horns, to actually destroy the banks of the Yamuna. And at the same time, he's actually desecrating, not only destroying the banks of the Yamuna, he's desecrating it by passing a little bit of stool and a bit of urine, like on the banks of the Yamuna, in the same place where Lord Krishna is about to perform the rasa dance with the gopis, this most exalted expression of ecstatic love that's there between Krishna and his devotees. So it means that his intelligence is taking everything the opposite way. He's considering what's right to be wrong. For him, it's right to be going and, tearing up the banks of the Yamuna, glaring, creating fear, making the earth tremble. So for him, that's right. And this is a person who has intelligence in the mode of ignorance. What they consider to be right is clearly wrong, and what's wrong for them is right. So what is right at this time, in this time period, this dusk time period, this twilight period, is in the spiritual world, by virtue of the eternal constitution or makeup, conscious living entities who are like sparks, they're attracted to one another. So the gopis are very attracted to one another because of their shared love for Krishna. And they imitate each other, or they imitate rather one of their, or someone with a more elevated consciousness. This is a description from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So these more elevated conscious persons, with their subordinate conscious associates, they constantly move in the Rasa Leela dance. That's the description of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So they're constantly moving in the Rasa Leela circle of Krishna, who's the super conscious supreme being. So that's a very nice graphic way that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes it. And in the material world, there's the sun and the planets, and they're constantly moving around the Dhruva constellation by the power of attraction of the Dhruva constellation. So this is just in the same way as all the pure living entities eternally circle around Krishna by the strength of his attraction. So that's a nice comparison that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes for this pulling power of Krishna. Now, there's the description of that attraction of Lord Krishna, and we had gone through it in the previous chapter. And Srila Sanatana Goswami, being one of these pure living entities, he expresses it this way, touching on this point of how attractive Lord Krishna is. I offer my respects to you, whose beautiful form enchants the whole universe. You arouse desire in the wives of the siddhas, and you stun all the animals of the Vrindavan forest, leaving them standing like figures in a painting. You make the currents of the streams stop flowing, and sweet sap rains from the trees and creepers. You make the swans and the other waterfowl come to your side, and the cloud serve you as an umbrella. Your glances deliver to Cupid whomever you see. Your feet relieve the earth of her suffering, and you make young women stand just like trees. So this is actually that attraction of Krishna described in the previous chapter, that he actually immobilizes the gopis. He immobilizes the swans. The trees start pouring sap, and all the animals are stunned. So these are, of course, symptoms of ecstasy in relation to Krishna, but it's to highlight his great attractiveness. So going back to the moment of the rasa dance, the gopis joyfully link their arms together for the rasa dance. So this joyfulness that they're experiencing after their separation from Lord Krishna is connected to Lord Krishna's explanation of his actions towards the gopis. So he gives as his reason for not immediately reciprocating with their affection or their love, he says it's because he wants to intensify their loving devotion. So they've gone through great suffering, feeling this great separation. And he gives the reason. He wants to actually make their loving devotion more intense. So Krishna makes this comparison between devotees that are suffering, waiting for his reciprocation, to that of poor men. So a poor man may gain some wealth, and he may lose that wealth. And he becomes so anxious when he's lost that wealth because he's had nothing and suddenly he gets something, and then he may lose that little something, and he can't stop thinking about it. He's in such anxiety thinking about that little thing that he may have finally got or may have come into his possession. So he can't think of anything else, the poor man. So Krishna makes that comparison with devotees who are waiting for his reciprocation. So he's delaying the reciprocation. It's almost as though they've lost the connection with Krishna. But Krishna is deliberately withholding, responding to devotees, because he really actually wants devotees to get more intense in terms of their loving mood towards him. Now, when Krishna explains this to the gopis, and this is just prior to Aristasura's arrival, the gopis realize that Krishna is bringing them to the highest perfection of loving service. And then if you compare it to the mood of Aristasura, he's there to come and disturb the peaceful situation of everybody. And what he's disturbing is this absorption in the thoughts of Krishna, of being constantly merged in the ocean of transcendental bliss. He's coming to disturb that. So the reason given by Srila Prabhupada for this disturbance that Aristasura is causing is that the material world is so contaminated that even in Vrindavan, the demons try to cause disturbance. So I'm ending here because this was how much I was able to extract from these two verses, just painting the picture of the arrival of Aristasura and what is transpiring. So at which moment in time he's coming, because that was the emphasis of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, saying then Aristasura arrived. So I've tried to paint a picture a little bit. So if there's any thoughts on these two verses or in terms of what I've communicated, please do go ahead.
Thanks, Krsnarcana. Nice research. And just thinking in the description in the beginning of the chapter, the overview, that Krishna must have been very displeased with the disruption of Aristasura, that the way he trashed him. He trashed him like a washing cloth. And then if you ever seen, someone from India, like traditionally, doing the trashing of the clothing, when you go to the river, when you see the washerman trashing those clothes, that's very violent, They really, trash. So you just imagine Aristasura being trashed like a, washing cloth, by Krishna. So Krishna was,
Thank you for highlighting the response of Krishna. We're going to come to hear that, but indeed, the disruption of mood necessitated flattening Aristasura, because he was, proudly charging with full force. So to actually be pounded and brought to a halt and pounded seems the appropriate response for that mood of, wanton disruption. Yeah.
Can you put some highlight on Arista? These names like Arista, Kamsa, Hiranyakashipu, they're like spiritual name, like, right? So, no spiritual. Because I see south side, the people they have all these names like this. Devyani, Devya, Maya, like it's like spiritual name. Like. So it's like spiritual.
Yeah, of course.
Because they are
Talk in the microphone so we can hear.
Yeah, Shukracharya was the guru, like of the demons. So they were his disciples, like that. So I'm just want to know, like, what is that actually? Like, we give our names like spiritual names, and these demons also have some names like that. So, and I saw south side, like their names are like that, connected to them.
So, well, based on your comments, I would have to, step in and point out that a comparison has been made, which is a little sensitive, between Shukracharya's disciples and his naming, and possibly names that are given to persons in one section of Chicago. So, I mean, one can't equate the demons that we're hearing about and human beings that are living in one area of Chicago and thinking that the same qualities that are present in the asuras are present in persons inhabiting that part of Chicago. One can't make that assumption. So forgive me if I say that, but it is very important. The term asura, it's very honest. It tells you right away that this entity is of demoniac tendencies, and that's what Krishna highlights in Bhagavad Gita, that broadly speaking, you can actually categorize entities as having divine qualities or demoniac qualities. So the minute you hear asura, it defines that individual. Particularly, like in the case of Aristasura, I tried to highlight, and it applies to generally those of demoniac tendencies. There's an inability to make a distinction between what's right and what's wrong. So that capacity of the intellect is not developed because there isn't a connection with religiosity. Rather, it's being completely in the mode of ignorance. And so, as in the case of Aristasura, what's wrong is seen to be right, and what's right is seen to be wrong. So that incapacity to make distinctions has implications also for how the worldview is. And the worldview has to do with I am so great, and with my actions, I'm going to become greater. It's all to do with a self-aggrandizement, and clearly that comes head on with Krishna and him being the controller. So Aristasura is like, a graphic example of the demoniac coming right into contact with the most divine. So divine tendencies are that capacity to distinguish between right and wrong has to do with all actions are being done with great care, being taken to perform duties in relation to Lord Krishna. or perform one's actions in relation to Krishna, and particularly with the desire to please him, so following the injunctions given by Krishna. So the demoniac, clearly, there's no regularity, there's no following of scriptural injunctions. And even in the case of, you brought up like Hiranyakashipu or Kamsa, there's even a training in Brahminical culture. And even some words may be spoken that sound like scriptural text, but somehow the actions do not connect. So there's the world's view, the tendency of the individual is so strong that it overrides even hearing scriptural things. So the intellect is, because it's not connected properly to Krishna, it's and it's functioning so independently, it's just following the path of degradation. So yeah, so the names, at least the Asura part is visible, and then generally the names, I mean, you talked about spiritual names, they're usually given according to the tendencies of an individual. So Hiranyakashipu liking soft beds and comfort, so material comforts. So it's indicative of the tendency of the person. Yeah, and of course, spiritual names, on the other hand, if they're given by a spiritual master, they're, because this is a mode of goodness leading to transcendence, the names are touching on one's mood of devotion to Lord Krishna. So very different naming. One is on that plane, and the other is more the tendencies of the demoniac that are very much on the material plane. I mean, so let's say a name like Krsnarcana, worship of Lord Krishna. So the mood is being captured by the spiritual master, the inclination for service to Lord Krishna is being captured. Then looking at, the Hiranyakashipu or the Kamsa, that tendency to like material comfort, completely different plane, the naming. So the name is appropriate to the tendencies of the individual, and also what category the person falls into. Because Krishna puts it that way, it's broadly speaking, it's divine and demoniac. So those are some thoughts. Of course, I'm not a Sanskrit speaker, so to be able to give you a very comprehensive, detailed, scholastic answer that I cannot give, sadly.
Hare Krishna, Madhuri.
Hare Krishna.
I was thinking that why Aristasura took the form of the bull. He became the bull form. That means, if I am correct, I don't know. So, Hasmul Prabhu can comment. So maybe he was thinking, if I have been bull, so Krishna will not kill me. Because, cows, and cow and bulls, they are very dear to Krishna, Go Brahman, cows and Brahmans. So I think he took the form of a bull. So you can comment on that?
Well, demons are not thinking, I have some fear and therefore I must find some way that I won't be killed by Krishna. They're convinced that they're going to kill Krishna. So that would not have been the motivation for the form taken. Why the particular form was taken, I didn't come across that in my research. Perhaps somebody else knows. But at any rate, the gopis had a response to the fact that Krishna killed a bull demon. And we come to hear that later on they thought that actually he committed a sinful act. So they actually wanted him to undergo some purification for having killed a bull, even though this particular bull form was, a form that's taken on because of mystic power. Is not a factual bull, so to speak, and also the nature of a bull is not the nature that Aristasura was displaying. I mean, I tried to paint a picture of how he's disrupting a most elevated activity that Krishna was about to perform with the gopis. So clearly his actions are completely adharmic. So a bull is generally performing dharmic activities, is serving constantly. I mean, I remember I was, one year I went to South Africa thinking that I'd like to dedicate a period of time to contributing to the change that was happening in the country, because I grew up in a place where there was a lot of oppression of people. And I always felt very sympathetic to the people being oppressed, because it seemed very inhuman, oppressing people deliberately. So I spent some time in a little exclusive African town teaching. And while I was there, I was seeing something of how there's the natural activity that's there of harnessing the power of the bull. So generally the bull is serving, pulling something, pulling heavy loads, helping with plowing of fields, etc. So all that is to benefit humans. And Aristasura was doing nothing beneficial. In fact, his aim, because you brought up what his aim was, taking a particular form, his aim for taking that form was to create fear in the gopis. He was causing the earth even to shudder and shake. So the motivation was completely adharmic. So, yeah. Thank you. Hi, Krishna. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Kishore Kishore ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Gaunitai ki jai.